The Insurrection Act. Those are the big words driving the day today. Donald Trump, in a Truth Social post, threatened to use the chaos in Minnesota, chaos that his administration caused, by the way, as an excuse to invoke the closest thing to martial law in the American system of government, the Insurrection Act. That authority would hypothetically allow Donald Trump to deploy U.S. troops on American streets as police officers, to enforce domestic law, to tell you what to do, to go after the political opposition, maybe to complete his efforts to go from wannabe dictator to actual dictator. And then, two bombshell news reports confirm the fears of many Americans that ICE agents are going out onto the streets of our country undertrained, underprepared, and underqualified for their jobs. Now, DHS says this is all an accident, but another report seems to make it clear that the lax screening is by design. And finally, today we have incredible guests. We will be speaking to Dr. Phil Solomon, an award-winning Yale professor and national leader on police reform. And folks, you do not want to miss this. The incredible Robby Roadsteamer is with us. He is one of the most famous protesters in America. He was recently arrested at the Minneapolis protests and recently released. We will have him on with us tonight. This is Defiance Daily, dispatches for the Defiant. I am your host, Miles Taylor. Now, we open up today with the blaring headline of this Thursday, and that is Donald Trump is once again threatening the invocation of the Insurrection Act here in the United States. Here is what he posted on social media. He said, quote, "If the corrupt politicians of Minnesota don't obey the law and stop the professional agitators and insurrectionists from attacking the patriots of ICE who are only trying to do their job, I will institute the Insurrection Act, which many presidents have done before me, and quickly put an end to the travesty that is taking place in that once great state." It's a very big deal, folks, that the president of the United States is making this threat. I would know. I was there in the first Trump administration when Donald Trump started openly fantasizing about invoking the Insurrection Act. And ever since then, he has been on a hunt to find the predicate, to find the reason, to find a justification that will withstand minimal public scrutiny to be able to declare that act. Now, as a reminder for viewers, the last time an American president invoked the Insurrection Act, it was in 1992 with George H.W. Bush, who invoked the act not to go oppress American citizens, but at the request of local leaders in Los Angeles who needed help restoring order after violent riots. We are talking about a completely different situation here. We are talking about a president of the United States deciding unilaterally to go send U.S. troops into a state despite their pleas not to do so, so that he can exert further control in a place where the crackdown is not justified. That is what we are potentially on the brink of tonight. I want to bring into the conversation my co-founder here at defiance.org, Xander Schultz, to talk about this. Xander, this almost feels like Groundhog Day. We hear the Insurrection Act brought up again and again and again from the first Trump administration all the way through last year. It seemed like every other month there was a threat to invoke it. And now here Trump is bringing it up again with regard to Minnesota.
You know, in the last chapter of our last thing we did together, the think tank, that was a big thing we were trying to do with leadership in Washington is war game. What happens if Trump invokes the Insurrection Act? Miles, can you help us understand that? You've been flagging this since before I met you. What powers does he gain if he does invoke this act? And where could that cause us the most trouble?
Yeah, look, I mean, this is, like I said earlier, the closest thing to martial law in our system. There is no ability for the president of the United States to sort of suspend the law and deploy the military to take over the country. But what the president can do is invoke this law from 1807 that allows for a president to overcome what's called the Posse Comitatus Act. So there's this act that was passed by Congress that says the president can't go send active U.S. military onto U.S. soil to, end up enforcing the law. But if he declares that there is an insurrection or a rebellion against the United States, which are spelled out in that 1807 law, well, then yes, the president can. But most legal scholars interpret this to mean an actual insurrection against the United States and against the seat of government, kind of like the thing that we saw on January 6th, where people stormed the seat of government to prevent the transfer of power, or an actual rebellion in the United States of people trying to throw off their government, or an actual invasion of the United States. This is a power that exists so that if America is invaded by another country, that the president isn't hamstrung by the Posse Comitatus Act and can send U.S. troops onto U.S. territory to repel that invasion. This is why you have heard Donald Trump for a decade use terminology that seems arcane and out of touch with modern American politics, like talking about invasions and insurrections and rebellions. And I will tell you, Xander, this began very early in the first Trump administration. Very early in that administration, Donald Trump was on a quest to figure out what the apex of his authority was. What do I mean by that? Well, he came into the presidency deeply disappointed to find out that the president of the United States does not have total power. And I don't say that in jest. Donald Trump is not a constitution reading public figure. He doesn't understand what the limitations are of the presidency and the U.S. Congress and the judicial system. I guarantee you he has never read the document. And so he came in trying to figure out, well, what can I do and what can't I do? And he was deeply disappointed to learn all the things he couldn't do. And in that quest to figure out what the apex of his power was, lawyers informed him of this thing called the Insurrection Act. And Donald Trump rarely used that terminology in the beginning. Now he talks about the Insurrection Act because he's had that conversation so many times with his staff. But at the time, Xander, he took to calling it his, quote, magical powers. I heard him in person use that term multiple times. We would be in a meeting. We would explain to the president something that we could or couldn't do with regard to a terrorist attack or a caravan of migrants coming to the border. And he would say, I want to use my magical powers. Let's use the magical powers, because he wanted to find an opportunity where he was told no, that he could say, actually, let's turn that no into a yes by invoking the Insurrection Act. This is something that staff got to the point that they joked about so often that it was like, well, Donald Trump will never do this. He's just got this fantasy of invoking the Insurrection Act. But that joking, as always with Donald Trump, didn't seem like a joke so much anymore when he directed us to prepare for him to invoke the Insurrection Act on the eve of one of his State of the Union addresses while I was there in the administration. All a long way of saying Donald Trump has long fantasized about this. He's been told by his lawyers that the circumstances on the ground do not justify him invoking it. He now thinks, potentially in Minnesota, he's got the optic he wants to call into force these extraordinary powers.
Can you walk me through the actual mechanism here? Does he have unilateral power to invoke it? What are his hesitancies? Why didn't he invoke in the past? Is there some approval process? And it's kind of secondly, if it is invoked and I don't know, the courts play catch up, or what is the process for revoking it, as we saw with the National Guard deployments, for instance?
Yeah, well, this is where we would get into uncharted territory, Xander, because in the modern era, we have not had a president invoke the Insurrection Act to have it challenged. I mean, it's been decades since we even experimented with presidents trying to bring forward this wartime authority. And again, in most cases, in the last 75 years or so, that's been presidents who've been requested to provide assistance in emergency situations in a very tailored manner where local authorities could not gain control of a situation. How could this be done? As simple as an executive order. The president would put out a statement saying he's invoking the powers of the Insurrection Act. He would define, most likely, whether that was an insurrection, a rebellion, or an invasion of the United States, characterize what that was, and how he was going to deploy U.S. forces to respond to that situation. That's pretty much all the president would have to do. Now, could it be challenged? Of course it could be challenged. And I would think in this case, if this happens in Minnesota, you are going to see the attorney general of that state rapidly respond and sue the Trump administration. In fact, I think as we speak, there have been conversations about the attorney general and the state preparing to preemptively sue the Trump administration over something along these lines. That wouldn't surprise me if that's how it goes forward. But what's going to end up happening is there's a big test here. And the test is whether the courts will agree with the president's analysis that there has been an insurrection or rebellion or an invasion of the United States. Historically, courts have tended to be a little bit more deferential to the executive on issues of national security. But this is such an obvious thing when a state says, we don't have a problem. And the president says, but I'm going to do this anyway. There's an obvious conflict there. But Donald Trump wants there to be visuals of violence and destruction so he can go back to the courts and say, who cares what they say? The violence is obvious. You need to defer to me. I'm the chief executive. You are courts. You don't know. And I'll tell you, Xander, this was my worry at the start of the Trump administration. Like you said, we ran war games with Democrats, Republicans, and independents in the lead up to this administration about what Donald Trump would try to do to use the Insurrection Act, what sort of conditions he would try to create, and what that would mean. And in all of that wargaming, we came to the conclusion that it was very likely he would come into office and try to foment circumstances that would allow him to justify these tools. And I remember the first week of June last year, when Donald Trump deployed the National Guard into Los Angeles, my very first comments, in fact, the news broke live while I was on MSNBC. My very first comment was, they're going into LA because they think they can cause riots. They think they can cause riots, and they're going to use the violent riots to invoke the Insurrection Act. Now, credit to the people of LA and the leaders of California, those riots that at first looked a little bit violent, 1% of protesters were violent, a couple of cars were overturned and burned, and then it was peaceful. And they ran out of the imagery. There was no justification to do this. That's why I believe the Trump administration sent the National Guard into D.C., wanted to do so in Chicago. They were picking cities that have a history of mass protests and trying to goad them into overreacting. And that didn't happen. Credit to all of these places, Portland included, they didn't overreact. Largely people protested peacefully. Now, here in Minnesota, in the wake of the killing of Renee Nicole Good, unfortunately, there are people around the president who I know want to take advantage of this tragedy and hope that the political opposition overreacts so that they can justify invoking this act. It was no mistake that Donald Trump sent that message out. The language was prepared. The language was considered to lay the predicate for the invocation of this act.
Taking advantage of a tragedy that in and of itself was caused by an aggression from a made-up crisis, right? So this is them kind of layering crisis onto crisis. The thing that seems unique, Miles, correct me if I'm wrong here, is not that the president has ever deployed the National Guard before domestically, or that the Insurrection Act was invoked, but that it seems like it's historically always come at the request of local leadership. It seems an anomaly, complete historical anomaly that we would invoke it despite local officials saying they don't need extra help. They're okay. The crisis is made up. One thing I worry about here, the time between him being able to invoke the Insurrection Act and whatever kind of revocation happens, or as quickly, there's usually this time in between the court's ruling on it and him getting his way, and there's crisis that's created in that time. To your point, in the past, these cities, LA, Portland, have been able to not give him the further probable cause. But I worry with him being able to deploy martial law-like aggression that we won't survive the in-between time. Is there any way to shorten that time and get a ruling faster?
Well, that's what I hope states are going to do is, suing in advance about this would be a very powerful thing to have happen, to see if they can potentially get some kind of injunction here. But make no mistake, Xander, this has nothing to do with the actual facts and circumstances on the ground. And that's what people need to realize. And they need to know that in Donald Trump's first term, his own cabinet members were worried he was looking for any excuse he could find to invoke this act because he wanted to be able to enforce his power at the barrel of a gun on U.S. city streets with the United States military. Hypothetically, Xander, there's almost nothing that a member of the United States military, almost no law, Donald Trump couldn't have them enforce if he invoked the Insurrection Act. I'm just hypothetically pulling out here examples of, barbershops are required to get licenses, in some cities around the country. There's nothing to say Donald Trump, in invoking the Insurrection Act, couldn't say, well, now I've got to shut down this barbershop and this barbershop because I don't think you've complied with your licenses. I mean, no law is too big or too small for him to try to claim that he can now enforce with the United States military. Again, that's why I say the closest thing to martial law, because that looks an awful lot like a dictatorship to a lot of Americans. And again, that's what people in the first term feared. We're not talking about liberal judges and liberal activists. We're talking about hardcore conservatives who were brought into the Trump administration, who saw the president's proclivity for the Insurrection Act and said, we can't let him do this. If he does this, he's going to have his way with this country. That's the whole purpose here. Now, we persuaded Donald Trump not to invoke that act in the first term, but clearly now he has a team who wants to support him in pursuing these lawless pursuits, including use of this act in a way that would be blatantly unconstitutional. So with that, Xander, I want to jump to our next story today and also talk to you about that one. But before I do, let me just say this. I urge you, if you are listening to today's episode here live right now of Defiance Daily, come be a part of this effort. We want to keep you updated on the things that are happening in this country, the abuses of power, and what you can do about them. You can join for free. You can go to defiance.org and sign up for updates so that you can stay abreast of what's happening and get answers to that question, what can I do in response? But also, if you want to become a member, if you want to be in what we call the Club of Courageous Americans, we have no limit on the member fee. It could be $1 a month or $1,000 a month. We crowdfund causes every single week to push back against these abuses of power. That is why defiance.org exists. And on this topic of ICE's abuses of power, this is what we did this week. We made sure that this organization, defiance.org, is funding training for thousands of people in Minnesota, know your rights training, so that they can be safe and secure and push back lawfully, peacefully, and defiantly against this ICE invasion in Minnesota. We also are funding efforts to make sure people know how to do this, how to film those abuses in person. The murder of Renee Nicole Good would have only had one side to that story were it not for people who decided to record what was happening. That side of the story would be a domestic terrorist attack, which is what the administration said. We are funding efforts to make sure people document the other side of the story, which happens to be called the truth. So please go to defiance.org, either sign up for our updates for free, become a member to help contribute every week to pushing back against those abuses of power. Folks, it matters. In this next story, we will tell you why. Tonight, there is new reporting that's raising questions about how ICE is training and hiring its agents. It's now the largest federal law enforcement agency in America, at least by budget. And a lot of people are worried that in growing that agency, underqualified, underprepared agents would be deployed onto American city streets, armed with weapons and guidance from the president that they have absolute immunity. And part of that story is apparently coming true. Now, most of us use artificial intelligence from time to time, spell check, writing emails. But it turns out, according to one of these two reports, that the Department of Homeland Security used it for something else, hiring ICE agents. And according to that reporting, the decision caused serious, very serious problems. NBC News Now senior Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley has been looking into this.
ICE was surging, right? I mean, this was the thing. They were trying to build up their numbers here to be able to go out and carry out President Trump's immigration agenda.
Yeah, they had the mandate to hire 10,000 new recruits after the One Big Beautiful Bill passed, and they had to do it by the end of 2025. So an easy way to do that is to find people who already have law enforcement experience, and they only have to do a 4-week online class, and then they're sent to their field office. Field office trains them a little more, and then they can go out. But what happened is AI went through these resumes, and anytime they saw the word officer, even if it was, I aspire to be an ICE officer, or I was a compliance officer, all these other ways, they automatically put them in the law enforcement officer field, which meant they didn't go to the ICE Academy, which is an 8-week in-person training. You get trained on things like the Fourth Amendment, when you can break the window of someone's car, how to handle your gun, physical fitness test, things that are really a barrier to entry on purpose so that people know how to go out in the field and do law enforcement work. And so people were miscategorized and sent out into these field offices. And now what we're told is they're doing a scrubbing to try to go through, find all these people who went out without the proper training, bring them back to training before they go out again. So yes, even though we don't know how many of these may have gone out onto the streets, they went to field offices. So that's the green light. They were able to go out and start making arrests.
Gee, I think anyone who has seen ICE in their community is not surprised to hear that agents are being sent out there without training in constitutional protections, things like the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution. Now, according to DHS, agents that have been flagged will be sent back for 8 weeks of training. And remember, this is already an incredibly shortened regimen. Training used to be 13 weeks. The administration has shaved 5 of those weeks off. Apparently, they think they can just, in 2 months, train you out there to go be a stormtrooper for the president of the United States. Now, if using AI to hire agents wasn't bad enough, a reporter has also uncovered just how loose the hiring process has become to become an ICE officer. Earlier this week, former Army veteran and journalist Laura Jadid released the following article on Slate. This article, "You've heard about who ICE is recruiting," she titled it. "The truth is far worse, and I am the proof." Jadid writes how she nearly made it through ICE's hiring process despite an extensive public record criticizing the agency and the Trump administration. And she reports that the recruitment process involved minimal screening, a brief interview, and a little apparent background vetting. Putting a finer point on Ainsley's discussion on ICE's hiring push, Jadid states, since ICE has hired 12,000 recruits in the past year, these new hires now outnumber veteran agents. So let's take a step back here and review. ICE, it's expanding quickly. It's lowering the bar to hire. And apparently it's sending newly armed agents into communities across the country without the training that they need in law or law enforcement. Xander, you had a conversation earlier today, with Dr. Phillip Solomon about everything that we are hearing. Tell me a little bit about that interview before we play it, and why is Dr. Solomon one of the leading authorities on this issue?
Well, not only is he a leading police reform authority, he has spent lots of time with Minneapolis police and their leadership, and was deeply involved in their last crisis, the George Floyd killing, in terms of trying to get their policing headed back in the right direction, repairing relationships in the community, and minimizing the types of terrible events such as the George Floyd killing. And so not only does he work directly with police departments and helps them with their training and their policies, he knows Minneapolis incredibly well. And so it was really important to get his insights on this critical moment.
Nice. I'll just remind folks, before we play that interview on the back end, listen to Dr. Solomon, an extraordinary expert. We will then, later in the episode, be welcoming the incredible Robby Roadsteamer to talk about his experience out there on the ground protesting against ICE. But let's jump to Dr. Solomon.
Hello from the past. You are welcome to the pre-recording of this episode, where I am live with Dr. Phillip Atiba Solomon, previously Goff, when we first built our friendship. It's great to see you, Phil. How you doing, buddy?
I am surviving, bobbing, weaving best I can in a world on fire.
Great answer. I think that's the answer for almost all of us right now. You're one of the foremost experts on policing. Not only that, you have specifically worked a lot in Minneapolis, where not too long ago, we were very familiar with their policing struggles. Obviously, some of the most famous kind of BLM moments happened in Minneapolis. George Floyd, most notably, but others. And you have worked with leadership, policing leadership, and city leadership to make strides there. And then you see everything that's happening now in that city. I just want to get your general reaction before I dig into anything specific.
Yeah, I mean, you have to feel for the people who are going through this, not just twice in a lifetime, but twice, like, as their kids are going through school. One of the things that really broke my heart was after Ms. Good was murdered in the street. The school up the street had to shut down because it didn't make sense to send kids to school when the federal government was sending troops into the streets. That's not, the people of Minneapolis haven't earned the burdens that they're carrying right now. And that's like, I'm just feeling for that.
I was reflecting on a story you told me a while ago. Actually, when I was in San Francisco with you and we were doing that use of force training together. And you had told me about a challenge you had with you were helping the Minneapolis police work through with the Somalian population. And part of the reason for the aggression ICE is saying that they have is because the crisis is so big, the scale of the problem so big, and therefore they have to be so aggressive. And that runs counter to what you shared with me, which was helping the Minneapolis Police Department come up with this beautiful strategy that allowed the community and the policing to have relationships that stayed intact, to be supportive to the people that weren't targets, et cetera. But I don't want to give away too much. Can you share both that story and then also your reaction to this excuse that aggression has to be met with aggression, or crisis has to be met with aggression?
Yeah, I mean, so first I got to dispel the idea that what's happening in immigrant communities is aggression, right? So let's be clear from the science perspective. In Minneapolis and elsewhere, where you have documented immigrant communities, you have lower rates of crime, higher rates of employment, higher rates of civic participation. That's not illegally voting. That is volunteering at soup kitchens, volunteering after schools, making sure that people have the community that they want. Where there are high concentrations of undocumented immigrants, you see reductions in crime. You see higher rates of employment. You see higher rates of civic participation. So when folks are coming to this country, regardless of how they get here, we see a smaller percentage of folks who violate the social contract, except when the government is doing it. So we first have to dispel with the idea that there's such a huge problem and we need such a surge. No, that's not what's happening. By the way, if it was what was happening, we'd see a larger percentage of folks who've got violence in their backgrounds who are the ones being detained. Right now, the estimates are somewhere around 5% of the folks who are being detained by ICE have a prior conviction for anything having to do with violence. So just let's stop the lying first. And then when we talk about, well, what's to be done when you have an immigrant community and there are problems, like there are problems in every community, it turns out the first thing you want to do is call them in and say, can you tell us about your problems? The second thing you want to do is say, what solutions would you want that you don't have the resources for? And the third thing, I know, crazy controversial, give them the things they're asking for. So in the Somali community in Minneapolis, frequently what was going on is they had folks coming in and they said, hey, we want to marry them with job placement and or language skill programs. And so law enforcement supported them in job placement and language skill programs. You know what happened? They got jobs and they learned to speak the language. It's a crazy thing that the things that you support are what you see in these communities. I think the most important thing in this moment, we were fed a lie about why it's happening, and that lie became a justification for the tragedy that was not just predictable, it was planned. We got to reject the lie whole cloth if we're going to get our way out of this into a better future.
You spend, thanks for making that clarification. It's an important one, that not only is their tactics wrong, but their whole justification why they're in there in the first place is wrong. You spend a lot of time helping police in their training, making sure when they go out into the field, they are leading nonviolently. They are reducing the kind of terrible tragedies and interactions that we've seen that became so famous over the last 10 years. A huge narrative right now that is emerging or that we're learning about is how undertrained a lot of these ICE agents are. Can you speak to what we can expect to see and what we are seeing when officers and security forces are undertrained and in the field?
Sure. I want to start with training, and then I want to go back to policy, because I think the place where we need to get to is conversations about policy. So there is this $50,000 payment you get to do if you'll just join ICE, this masked, unidentified secret police force that it moves apparently at the direct direction of a fascist aspiring president. They now have, I believe it's 47 days of training before they're out in the street, and that some AI error has in fact led to less training for some of those officers. What that means is the training they get is going to be insufficient for just doing what ICE was supposed to be doing, much less for doing things that ICE was never meant to do, like managing crowds and First Amendment protests. That said, if we're stuck on, well, the reason this is different is because they're so much more poorly trained, I think we're missing the forest here, because we have worked on trainings for law enforcement as a way to make sure we're able to talk about the policies that say law enforcement can never be trained to be here in the first place, right? Absolutely, you can train law enforcement to identify someone who is experiencing substance disorder or mental health crisis. They shouldn't be the ones who were the first interveners on there. I use this as the example. If someone is threatening suicide and law enforcement shows up, what they gonna do? Be like, don't do it or I'm gonna shoot you. It's the most counterintuitive thing on the planet. So it's where we're sending and how we're using the equipment for punishment that is the real problem. And on top of that, they're poorly trained to even do that much. So I want them out of the places where they already know they can't be helpful, out of the places where we know it's just a farce why they were sent in. And yeah, if we got to send them in, give them better training, but the training is the red herring in all of this. The training is not the thing. A better trained force that's designed and sent to terrorize a community is still terrorizing community, and we should have the same problem with that.
Thanks for that, Phil. I wonder, a lot of the local leadership are folks you've worked with in the past, the police chiefs, the mayor, et cetera. This is not too long ago that you were kind of at the center of the last crisis they were having and helping them navigate that. I wonder what your advice is for those people and what you would like them to see you do. Before I flip that to you, I've had this thought, and you could maybe let me know if this is naive, that policing in America is maybe being given this opportunity for redemption rather quickly, maybe more quickly than they could have in any other scenario, to actually show up and protect their communities. And so I want to leave you with that reflection too, and let me know if I'm being naive.
I'm always, look, repair above all other things. I think the human condition is about figuring out not how to prevent harm to people, but how to repair once you've done it, right? I think that's been my primary lesson as being a new father, is I'm not going to get almost anything right the first time, but you want to fix it and know that repair is a part of what it is to build a loving home and a loving community. So my hope would be that there's opportunities for redemption here of our broad social fabric. But what I would say is that we saw people calling for defunding in 2020, calling for police abolition in 2020, and then immediately as the murder spike hit, which was real, we saw folks who hadn't really thought about it too much being like, oh, that was ridiculous. We should never have been there. Let me scrub my Twitter avatar. I never said that. I never meant that. And now everybody's like, well, but ICE has got to be defunded because look at that. And that becomes more palatable, right? What we're seeing on camera is what is happening in vulnerable Black and brown communities without the cameras there. The difference is that you have the entire community coming together and saying, this is not okay. It's what happened for a brief period in 2020. So I think that rightly people are making the distinction between the ugly things we've seen police do and the ugly things that a masked secret police department serving at the alleged direction of a fascist aspiring president is doing. They are not the same. There is an opportunity for law enforcement to say that we've done that, and we need to not be doing that. We need restraints from that. Get us out of these situations. These communities need care, not punishment. And there's also an opportunity for a political class that ran away from the principled objections to violent state occupation to say, you know what? We have not gotten the calculus on this right at all, from too far one way, too far another way. Like there's a place to be where we can insist that what we see is unacceptable, but we can also not abandon communities to their own devices. I think the redemption opportunity here, in other words, is not for police. It's for all of us who are rightfully morally outraged by what we see and feel like we haven't made enough collective progress, because we haven't, to reclaim some of the moral clarity of 2020 and apply it to this incredibly more arch moment.
So beautifully said, man. I'm so grateful to have you in my circle, and America is lucky to have you doing the work you're doing. So Dr. Phillip Solomon, thank you so much for joining us, man, and jumping on here in short notice.
Appreciate you. Love you, friend. Thank you for all that you're doing. More soon.
Later, brother.
A great conversation, Xander. I thought that was fantastic and informative. And hopefully what you all were talking about in terms of redemption is somewhere in our future.
Yeah. I hope so. It's such a, I feel this actually, I'm sure you feel this too, Miles. I feel the purpose in a unique way in this moment, that we have the opportunity to step up for each other. You know, when you're not in crisis, you don't really have an opportunity to be of service to each other. And so I not only hope we feel that, you know, peer to peer and neighbor to neighbor, but also our local institutions also are able to step up into that opportunity, and we're able to come out of it together.
Yeah. Well, look, in keeping with that, and people who are doing real things in the community, we are going to make a beeline to one of our favorite segments of this show. Every single day on our 5 p.m. Defiance Daily show, we have a segment called Who is Joining the Defiance? We are skipping right to that segment because the answer to that question today, the person we are honoring with joining the Defiance, is someone who is here with us. And that very special guest is not joining the Defiance per se, but he's actually rejoining the Defiance after being in custody for the last few days. Now, Robby Roadsteamer is a name that is already very well known in the Defiance movement and has been across the United States. He has been standing up day in and day out against the atrocities you are seeing on television, on social media. If you are unfamiliar with his game and his absolute power, here is Robby on Monday outside the Whipple Federal Building. Take a look.
All right, the not ready for primetime players. You got your super soakers, you got your fucking baloney. Where are we going? We want us over here? Oh, we got the power march. What are we doing here? Back up! What? Back up! Oh, back up!
Lucky for us, Robby has now been released from custody, and better yet, he is with us today. Welcome to the program, Robby Roadsteamer.
Hell yeah, Miles. It's an honor to be here. Robby Roadsteamer, out of a detention center, dirty Minnesota. They used the hoses on me. They used a torture rack. They brought out some ex-cast members from Hard to Kill with Steven Seagal to go at me. But I am here. I am here, and also the person who created Robby Roadsteamer, Rob, who is me and stuff. So, yes, it's an honor to be here. I love you guys.
I wasn't sure if you were going WWE and doing the full thing in character or not.
Well, we have to remember that Trump is in the WWE Hall of Fame. Class of 2013, and he's pretty much impersonating Vince McMahon from the late 90s, the corrupt oligarch. I can do anything with this audience. I own all of you. You're all fired. And so basically, when you understand that, you just have to create your own absurd wrestling character, which I have. Robby Roadsteamer, let's storm the Applebee's. And basically, what you do is you reverse the energies of MAGA's absurdity onto them. I feel so bad for a lot of the blue. They fight with valor. They fight with facts. And it's like, what's the point? They're absurd. The only way you go at absurdity is more absurdity. You know, you get the guitars out and you're like, hey, Mr. Tangerine Man, get rid of brown people for me. Aryan white. There ain't no place I'm going to. All right, we got ice here. Let's do a solo. Harmonica solo right now. Let me get this harmonica. Hold on. God damn it. I need the oil on this thing. I'm no Jesse Wells. I'm trying. Here I go. Yeah, and that's usually where they bring out the 5 stars on Grand Theft Auto, and they have like the special agent forces that are getting 90 an hour. Last week they were mall cops over at St. Paul, and now they're getting 90. And it's embarrassing. The most embarrassing part of Monday is, and you'll hear it when I'm screaming in that clip, I'm like, you got your baloney, because some of the protesters were throwing baloney at the ICE agents in the cars. Some old lady who looked like Elizabeth Warren showed up, and she's like, you guys are doing just a fabulous. She had like a Rose Kennedy accent, like, and it's really amazing what you guys are doing. And here's some baloney, because they're full of baloney. And that's what really triggered the ICE agents. So like when they come out to get me, I'm like, you guys got your super soakers, you got your baloney, and they tackle me. I'm the only one that gets arrested.
Yeah,
and like, I had this very beautiful lady agent. She was DHS agent 667 Violet. And I'm like, did you guys just arrest me? Like, they were throwing baloney at you. All I was doing was singing hit songs. Like, it was Minnesota, so I was like singing songs like,
well, Rob,
what's that?
Tell us in that moment, though.
Yeah, talk to me.
Why did they arrest you? What did they claim? They claimed you were obstructing their passage down that road, or what was the claim?
My beautiful lady cop who handled me, she first wanted to get me on trespassing charges, but I have already been detained by ICE in Portland, and I knew my rights. I had not crossed federal property. And so the citation, blocking traffic. That's what it took 20 ICE agents and DHS police officers to take down one boy giraffe. Blocking traffic is the citation.
Well, I mean, Rob, or maybe I'm speaking to Robby on this one. I look at someone like you, and I obviously think, this is the insurrection. This is the national security threat to the operations of the federal government right here. You are worth invoking this wartime law.
Oh, hell yeah. I'm everything Alex Jones told you about. The lizard people Illuminati that are coming for your children. And it's absurdity. And we realize that a lot with the Haight-Ashbury movement of the merry pranksters. The best way to fight against oligarch authoritarian figure is to use absurdity to grab the collective culture, the working class, and see how silly it all really is. And that's what we do. We're hearing back to the summer of love, the merry pranksters, and by using absurdity, we smoke them out of their holes. I was actually the last person to troll Charlie Kirk in his lifetime, and I stormed him at Turning Point in Tampa a month before he died, dressed up as an alligator, and I was like, Charlie, it's Gary the Guantanamo Gator. When are you going to debate me in a SummerSlam steel cage match? And he was laughing his ass off, completely disarmed. And then maybe you can have a normal conversation with some of them about something besides men and women's sports and a pathway to citizenship.
Well, our friends over at the Portland Frog Brigade, who I'm sure you're familiar with,
absolutely, we got so high after I got arrested in Portland, all legends. And like when half of them took their heads off, they were all just local punks and weirdos and dweebies, the type of people in high school that you would see theater kids doing this. And they're like, oh my God, we've been doing this because of you. We've loved your animal onesies. Because I've been doing this for years, man.
Yeah.
I've been wearing animal onesies. And what I do is I would go around bridges in Massachusetts. I'm from Boston, Massachusetts area. And I'd be up there like, all right, let's storm Applebee's after this. I'm the Jeffrey Epstein giraffe. Everybody loves me. And at first they think I was with them. And then I get into the songs and stuff like Trump was on the Jeffrey Epstein plane. Trump was on the Jeffrey Epstein plane. And then they realize the farce. And I feel like by doing that, I build a bridge to broken-hearted, single, lonely MAGA boys that might want to come across, but are afraid that we're all beta cucks. And I just want to give them, when I go to Turning Point, because I tour around the country along with 5051, with Unfuck America, which is a bunch of lovely influencers and debaters, Mercedes from Camp Callout and the gang. We go up to Turning Point, the front gates. I was there a couple of weeks ago with Amerifest. They had Erica Kirk's big pay-per-view with the fireworks, better than Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 16 and stuff. But I go in there and I scared away Nick Shirley in like 20 seconds. You can see it on my YouTube. I'm like, There he is, Nick Squirrely. What are we doing over here, brother? And I turned it into Coachella, or Wokechella. Let's take back the words that Fox has taken away from us. So I'm like, this is the new Wokechella over here. We're having a great time at Turning Point. And afterwards, a lot of them come up and they're like, hey, we noticed your comedy routine earlier and stuff. What was that all about? And I'm like, it's about the fact that we're being pitted against each other in a civil war by rich oligarchs, and we should just take it down a notch and maybe talk about having a slightly better minimum wage to start with. I like you, man. I want you to get benefits just as much as me. We don't have to be at each other's throats anymore.
Robby, I've got to say, I honestly feel like you are America's gadfly right now, and that's got a rich tradition. I mean, go back 2,000 years. Socrates was doing what you are doing to highlight the corruption of Greek democracy and the people who are throwing it overboard. You're doing the same thing 2,000 years later, and it works. Why does it work so well?
Because at our hearts of hearts, we have a sense of humor. We understand the absurdity of it, and we understand that we're being played to a certain degree. And I think by throwing it back onto them, and by the way, I hopefully don't have the same fate as Socrates. That would suck if Trump's going to pull out the hemlock again and we're going to poison the giraffe with hemlock, people. He's asking too many questions. But with the absurdity, you can sort of show the emperor's new clothes really easy, man. Every time I use this approach, and I've trolled Hulk Hogan, I've trolled Charlie Kirk, I've gotten Marjorie Taylor Greene, Nick Squirrely, Shirley, and stuff. I mean, it's like holy water against them. Because once again, I am going to, bookend this with the fact that Trump is in the WWE Hall of Fame. And anybody who's watching late 90s wrestling know that this is just another, just absurd episode of Monday Night Raw. And I know how to play that game because a little bit too much information. I lived with China from the WWE. I actually produced her documentary for Vice and A&E. I'm friends with Mick Foley, and we know that this is his whole game. As a matter of fact, I just want to say one of the ideas being brought up right now in 50-51, Flair in Washington, is up against Donald Trump's big day of UFC at the White House. We want to throw a wrestling event over at Union Station with a wrestling ring and call it something like WrestleMania or something. And we're going to have the Portland Frog versus the guy who threw the sub at ice versus the giraffe for the heavyweight title. And let's just win their fan base over by showing how ridiculous their leaders are and maybe coming together on other platforms. But I told the people at 50-50 this summer, let's take the word protest out because protest is scaring everybody away. It's making Fox News. The Antifa left had another No Kings protest today. And let's switch the word out to festival. And we're going to just party, bring the working class together. We're going to have all our leaders from the Progressive Party, but we're also going to make this as fun and inviting across the board. When and this is not new. When counterculture happened with Vietnam, 50,000 people dying, Dick Nixon in the White House, all the assassinations, the country tuned in, turned on, and dropped out and went west. And I think we're going west. But this time, maybe west is east, up in Boston with the Dropkick Murphys, Robby Roadsteamer, the new Seattle. I'm the new Kirk the Lame. You remember when he played harmonica? No, that was Tim Chalamet. I'm sorry.
Robby, you're dead. I'd say you're dead. Correct in that the need for fun is massive right now. One thing that we don't have on our side that we maybe did in 2015 is we're burnt out, man. We're in year 10, year 11 of this fight with Trump. We tried to do the, calling to our better angels, getting people to elevate past it. People felt like maybe, we were speaking down to a lot of people. We weren't understanding their problems and whatnot. And I agree. If we're going to have the stamina to persevere and fight, there needs to be absurdity. There needs to be joy. Some of the best organizers I know in the country, like Latasha Brown, understand this really well. And dude, I'm just really happy you're out there doing what you're doing, man. Keep it going. What's the next stop on the tour? Where are you heading next?
Actually, it's funny you asked that. Tomorrow I'll be in downtown Los Angeles. We're having a big rally down there, I think at their ICE detention center. It's going to have some really cool people, including Woke Farmer, who always heckles Pete Heggie over at his Christian fundamentalist nationalist church in Washington. Chelsea Golds from San Diego will be there tomorrow. She wrote the song "Christy Nome is a bird-legged hoe." What, Christy Nome? And then Saturday, if you want the real WrestleMania, we're going to be at the Broadville ICE Detention Center, 11 a.m. with all your favorites. Jolly Good Ginger, who, my God, man, if there's somebody who's the heart of the movement, he is like John Goodman from Big Lebowski. And Monday, he single-handedly, I think, pressured ICE to release me from the prison. Go to my Instagram and my videos. You'll hear Jolly Ginger in the back, "Free Robby! Free Robby, you Nazi fucks!" And I'm like, oh my God, is this the Big Lebowski? And then they drove me off to the airport. And he's like, "We got to get you out of here, Robby. I mean, tonight those ICE agents will be looking for you again." And I'm like, man. So we're going to try to have a great time this weekend and stuff down in Chicago. I have a comedy show later on that night. Just, find the social nets. I don't like to, figure out where I am too much right now for my enemies and stuff. But we're going to have a big party tomorrow in Los Angeles. And if you miss it, come to Illinois this Saturday and party at the biggest festival in North America.
Hey.
Yeah, we're going to have Woke-chella Saturday at the Broadville, Illinois Detention Center.
Miles and I have been missing out on the fun. We might need to take
we
this on
have.
the road.
I mean, Robby, before we let you go, I'm going to put you on the spot. What are you doing for the State of the Union, February 24th? Can we lure you out to Washington, D.C.?
Oh, I'm a free agent, baby. You can definitely lure me out to Washington. I'm in Boston. That's a dirty hour-and-a-half flight down, man. I'll come in my screw the suit, man. I'll come in either Gary the Guantanamo Gator outfit or the Jeffrey Epstein Files giraffe. And maybe you guys can vote or whatnot, but I'm down, man. I am your man.
We'll have you here. Robby, I wrote, "Get Robby to Sotu," and then I struck through Socrates. No Socrates.
No Socrates right now, man. This is all the summer of '67 in the Oliver Stone movie right now. We're just beginning to ascend. They're not going to take me down yet, but right now, man, let's go to that State of the Union and let's have some fun. I want to date Lauren Boebert. I love her. She's got strong horse legs, just like Marjorie. And just say, hell yeah. Let's go watch Beetlejuice and vape, Lauren.
Robby Roadsteamer, you are one of a kind, my friend. We are so grateful to have you today. We hope you will come back, and we hope we see you in a month.
Anywhere, anyhow, man. I'm your lead dog. Let's make the MIFs and let's storm Applebee's.
And he's out. Later, Robby.
Thank you for joining us. Xander,
more of that.
Favorite interview of all time?
Was it an interview? We could just kind of let the tape roll.
That's true. That's true. And I'm also good with that. If Robby would come do that once a month, I would feel like
just the guest,
100 pounds lighter.
That was awesome. What do we got left, Miles? I know we're getting close to time here.
Questions from our crew. We're close on time. Members of defiance.org. I have watched you having a rollicking good time on seeing one of the faces of defiance, Robby Roadsteamer, here on the program. If you've got questions, drop them into the chat. I'm in the chat. I'm seeing we so needed this. Can we hire him? more, please. People very excited that we just invited him to the State of the Union. I don't want to let too much slip.
Did you have half our days filled with frogs and giraffes? We went from our frog meeting.
I did not, but that was today. I'll tell you. I mean, we've teased it to folks, but we are doing a big event here in Washington, D.C. on February 24th, the night of the State of the Union address. Donald Trump is going to try to lure you to listen to his lies and his own unfunny brand of absurdity and autocracy. And we're going to do something else. We are going to be doing a nationwide live stream from a major venue in Washington, D.C. with many of the pro-democracy figures you look up to, left, right, and center, we hope you will come join us in Washington, D.C. We will have an announcement about that very, very soon, but circle that date on your calendar, February 24th. We are very, very excited about that. We've got a question here in the chat from Star. Government outlets are flooding Facebook with propaganda. Thoughts on how to counter it? Gosh, and it's not just Facebook, Star. I mean, it's the White House podium. I was chatting with Brian Karem today. You guys probably know Brian. He's a former White House correspondent who often stood up to the Trump administration in that first administration. And, you know, he was saying today that Caroline Leavitt, no one challenges her. She just goes to the podium and spews total propaganda and then fights with anyone in the press that dares to contradict her. This is scary times. Xander, I want to get your thoughts on that and your reaction of how you fight back against that flood of propaganda.
The shift in the tech community is one of like my big personal tragedies. I came from tech originally. I really believed in the democratization of information, the connections and relationships that can be built online. I bought it all hook, line, and sinker. It's really sad. I mean, Facebook is somewhat the least of our problems. We have billionaires that have essentially bought both TikTok and Twitter and changed their algorithm to suit the White House agenda. That's a lot more challenging than a couple bad accounts or propaganda or whatnot. They are literally changing the algorithm and warping people's understanding of what's happening in society to a political end. The algorithm was already hurting us because it liked volatile content. It liked us to be angry, but now it's led with, you know, these goals. And so I don't know if there's much to be done other than I see a lot of people turning away from social media. I think there is a understanding that it doesn't serve us well. These kind of traditional legacy feed algorithm media companies that we're being kind of lied to or warped no matter what direction, you know, what side of the equation we believe in. And so and AI is certainly, I don't know if you've been on social media lately, the amount of just fake videos on places like Facebook is incredible. So I hope we just turn away from those products slowly but surely. Go to places like this that give us vitamins instead of sugar. But yeah, there's not much.
We can have sugar too. Robby Roadsteamer is sugar.
Yeah, Robby's our sugar.
Herman Jacobs asks in the chat, when is it time for mass work stoppages? What more has to happen for the time to be ripe? This is a timely question, Xander. Can you tell us a little bit about one of those activations that's coming up?
You know, we're doing a big chunk of our daily podcast tomorrow on exactly that. MLK Day, January 20th this year. There is going to be a workers' strike. We're going to give you more info on that tomorrow from one of the leaders that's leading the strike. But to answer his question, soon. It's about that time in America. So, and luckily, you know, I was looking over the materials today. It's led by some of the most effective pro-democracy groups in the country. And so it's going to be organized well. It's going to be effective. And yeah, we'll share more tomorrow.
That's amazing. S. Dahl asks the question, does the Insurrection Act allow the military to enforce federal laws too? Yes, it would, hypothetically. Now, again, keep in mind, you know, Donald Trump's invocation doesn't automatically make it right. But as Xander noted at the top of the program, the thing that we worry about is that delta. That delta is the time between illegal act happening and the administration being held accountable, if they are, by the courts. And that could be short, that could be very, very long. I mean, we saw in the first month of the Trump administration, 3 of the 4 major things that I had warned about on immigration that Trump was going to do that were illegal, that we told him in the first term, this is illegal, Mr. President, you can't do it. He did. And on most of them, it wasn't until the end of this year that courts found those acts to be unconstitutional, and they're making their way through on appeal. I mean, that's how the justice system works. And so that is a worry that he will illegitimately invoke the Insurrection Act and be able to use it to repress people in the communities in which he deploys the United States military before the courts can wrap their heads around it. And then the big question becomes, what if Donald Trump defies the courts? What if all the way up to the Supreme Court, they say, you invoked the Insurrection Act and you did it unlawfully, turn around. And Donald Trump doesn't turn around. Then who enforces that judicial order. That's a big worry. That is a constitutional crisis if it happens. It's one of the reasons we needed to make sure Donald Trump did not become president of the United States, and now he is. And we need to be prepared to fight back. That starts with organizing. That starts with courage. That starts with movements like this and you all who are members of defiance.org. So thank you for your courage, and we're going to continue to fight this. Xander, before we take off, any notes of optimism from your end? What has you fired up going into the end of this week?
Just America continuing to build that collective action muscle. You know, you talked about a constitutional crisis. What do we do then? Well, when we lose the institutions, if we're organized, we claim our power back. We are governed by consent. And the only thing that stops us from being able to remove that consent is if we're not organized. And I just see us, we talked to Minneapolis leadership yesterday. I see us organized locally. We are talking about a national movement that's happening next week. We are starting to build that muscle. We see the defiance here growing. So I know that I'm somewhat repeating myself every time you ask the question, but that's the muscle we need. And I see us starting to exercise it. I see signs that we'll be able to do it at the scale and at the force we need to get us out of this, even if our institutions and checks and balances can't meet the moment.
Absolutely. And look, I will repeat that call to action from the beginning of the program. If you're not a member, go sign up for free for updates. Go sign up at defiance.org. You also can sign up for updates at defiance.news. Get those free updates on what's happening in this country, why it matters, and things that you can do. If you want to, if you feel inspired to take the next step and actually jump in with all of us to go fund those efforts and take additional actions every single week to combat those abuses of power, I urge you to do it. Yesterday, we had our weekly mission briefing where we rolled out our latest actions, how we're going to respond to what's happening in Minnesota. Definitely go to our website and read about these. We're doing real things. And that's why we're doing this. That's why we've given up our other careers and our day jobs, and we are fully focused until this man is gone from office, at a minimum, on defying Donald Trump's abuses of power. And that is done, as Xander noted, through collective action. We do it together. It's a lot easier as a group to do these things and to step up and have the courage than doing them alone. So come join that club for courageous Americans. We're thrilled to have you. Grateful for everyone who joined the program today. Dr. Solomon, and of course, the incredible Robby Roadsteamer. I hope we see him on the night of the State of the Union for our counter-programming event. Stay tuned for that. Thank you again, as always, folks. Stay loud, stay brave, and stay together.